Hello, 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 everyone. Welcome to another episode of Sree's global show around COVID-19 and the events around COVID-19 and the times of our pandemic. This is episode 260, and we are reflecting and discussing a busy news day that has not ended here in the United States, even though it's already 9 p.m. Eastern time. The topic, something I didn't expect to write about or talk about in this way: terrorism in DC. We had domestic terrorists storming the Capitol. We had the results of two major Senate races in Georgia. And yesterday, the pandemic hit the highest number of deaths in the entire 10 months of the crisis. We have so much to talk about, and we have three very special guests with us tonight. Mary Curtis is with us. Mary C. Curtis is a columnist at Roll Call, podcast host of Equal Time with Mary C. Curtis, and she's a returning guest. Dr. Kati Joshi is with us at Prof. K. Joshi. She's the author of numerous books and a professor as well. And one of her books was the reason we had a conversation a few months ago: White Christian Privilege, The Illusion of Religious Equality in America. And among the things you saw on display today was definitely white privilege. We are also joined by Liza Donnelly at Liza Donnelly, returning guest. She's a New Yorker cartoonist and the host of hashtag Liza Draws on Haps TV. Please check out her work on Twitter as well as on Haps TV. And she will be sharing some of the drawing she did today, as she, very emotional day, shared what she was seeing on her television and sharing it for the world to see. We're so grateful to all of you for being here with us. You'll meet them in just a moment. Hi, everyone. I'm Sree Sreenivasan. Thank you very much for joining us. It is our honor to have you here with us tonight. We are going to be talking about the crisis in DC and so much more. News may break as we speak because there are things happening in the Senate right at this moment. We will get an alert if anything happens. But today we want to hear from you also. Please talk to us, post in the comments. We're live right now on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and LinkedIn. And we really want to hear your voices as well. Ask our guests anything. We'll be able to cover so many aspects of the crisis today and beyond. And I just want to say I'm the Marshall Loeb Visiting Professor of Digital Innovation at Stony Brook School of Journalism and the co-founder of Digimentors, a social, digital, and virtual events and hybrid events company. We'd love to talk to you about producing your events this year, whether they're in person, virtual, or hybrid. So please do get in touch with me. If you've not joined us before, in the first 250 episodes of the series, we've had more than 457 guests from 73 cities in 20 countries. After being live every single day for 250 days, we've gone to a twice a week mode. And as breaking news warrants, and today certainly warranted this discussion, I want to give a big shout out to our producers, Rose Horowitz at Rose Horowitz 31 and Vandana Menon, Vandana_Menon, who are going to be tweeting live and sharing, and they've been with me now since we started doing this in March, and eternally grateful to them. And a big thanks to our friends at Scroll.in and Scroll Global. You can find our archives at youtube.com/Sreenet. All right, let's get to our guests. And again, please hit share right now. Please retweet, or please tag a friend. They can watch live or they can watch later. You can watch it with your TV on as well. And let's get to our wonderful guests. Our guests again are Kati Joshi, Liza Donnelly, and Mary C. Curtis. Please get ready to ask them questions as well. So let me welcome them all to our show tonight. Hello, folks. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
We're just so grateful to all of you for being here. What a day. I want to just ask each of you for a quick kind of where your thoughts are. What have you been processing? I know my day started with a tweet saying great news out of Georgia. At that point, only Reverend Warnock had been confirmed as having won. And then the day just kind of went through a roller coaster of emotions. So let's start with Professor Joshi, just your quick take, and we'll go to each one of our guests.
Well, I'm glad to be here. I am a proud Atlantan, proud Georgian, living in New Jersey, but I grew up in Atlanta. And wow, when I woke up this morning, the high that I was on, I couldn't believe it. I was so excited. It was also about Reverend Warnock. It was also looking good for John Ossoff. And then, I actually watched live when Joint House did what it did and separated to go talk about Arizona's non-certification of the election, and we'll go downhill from there. As somebody who has both lived professionally and personally at the intersections of race and religion, I'm very much still processing all that's going on today and look forward to talking with you and our guests.
Oh, thank you very much. And Dr. Professor Joshi, if you could retweet the live video version, that would be great as well. That should be the latest tweet on my account.
Okay.
I'm going to be unpinning my tweet so that you have the latest one at the top. So anybody can share that as well. That would be great. Let's go to Mary C. Curtis.
Well, I started out, as I do every Wednesday morning, on the television on a morning show in Charlotte, North Carolina, where I do political commentary. And as your previous guest said, we were talking about the Georgia election and what looked like the Democrats doing very well, and talked some about faith as well. And it's probably not a good idea to attack the Black church in Georgia, as Kelly Loeffler did for Raphael Warnock, the Reverend, who was in King's Ebenezer Baptist Historic Church. And we also talked a little bit about the day to come, where people will be challenging the votes, even though they had been certified, the electoral vote, it wouldn't make a difference, but it was going to be performative, and what might happen. And then we saw what did happen, and it was stunning. I would have to say an image. I write about the intersection of politics, culture, and race. And something that stayed with me was seeing someone walking through my capital, my government, with a Confederate flag. And so much, I think, of those stories are linked, because in Georgia, you had the activism of African-American women for the most part that really got the vote out. And people really saw the power, but sometimes people are afraid of that power. And so much of this fight over what's legitimate and what's not is the fact that for so many people, the votes of Black people are not legitimate. And to see those folks, this predominantly white crowd, and I know we'll talk about later the way they were treated, taking over, swarming my capital, it was just quite emotional. And I guess I will leave it at that for now. But obviously, my son's a historian, and with progress is pushback. And we saw violent pushback, aided and abetted and really stoked by the President of the United States, and so many enablers. And it's, President-elect Biden said, this isn't who we are, but in some ways, as the folks on the panel know, this kind of is.
Well, thank you, Mary, and thank you for being so blunt and clear about what the situation is. I kept thinking throughout the day, as many people said, imagine if it had been a BLM, Black Lives Matter protest, or group of any other community, any brown or Black people. And we saw when in fact there were BLM protests, full riot gear preparation, blocking of the Capitol steps, and today nothing, and just really tragic. Let's go to Liza, and Liza is also going to give us her thoughts and also share some of the beautiful, dramatic, and terrible images that she had to draw today. So Liza, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. My day yesterday, I spent the day on edge yesterday because a friend of mine, a Georgian who lives down in rural Georgia and works in the political sphere, she said there were bomb threats to Georgia polling places. So I was worried all day yesterday about that, and luckily nothing happened. But this morning I woke up, and with the news of Reverend Warnock, I usually every morning I tweet out "Good morning" when I get up. Just it gets my day started and people enjoy it. This morning I tweeted in all caps, "Good morning," because it was exciting that the son of a woman who picked became a senator, and and it looked good for Asaf as well. So that's like you guys, that's how my day began, very happy. And I knew today was going to be difficult, and I knew I was going to spend most of it in front of the television, one way or the other. I love the ceremony of our democracy. I love watching the process. And when the process began quietly, and then all of a sudden, I saw images of crowds of people surging on the Capitol, I knew we were in for a bad time, and I got very emotional. I told one of your producers, Sree, who wrote me around that time, she said, "Are you going to draw this?" Because normally I would be drawing what I see draw out in the world, but I also can't go anywhere now. I draw from my television half the time, or most of the time now. And I said, "I can't draw now. I can't do this. It's too emotional. I'm too upset. I'm too scared." But their question got me to thinking that I can't not draw. So and it's also very hard to draw that much motion, that much movement, that much activity for me. But I did draw it. I'll show you on my iPad. I did it on my iPad. I drew my opinion of what I was seeing. And can you see it?
Yeah, we can. Yeah.
Yeah,
yeah, we can.
So it's not an
There you go.
exact. Let's see. There.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
It's not an exact. I didn't see those two people, but I saw people like that, and they
Sure.
were all like that. And I saw so many Trump's flags and American flags, and I don't know. And then all the people started showing up, and I also drew. Later, I drew Biden, which I often do. Biden when he gave his
Oh yeah, we see that there. Yeah.
his speech, which was very reassuring, I found. And he said many wonderful things. And one of the things he said was, President Trump step up, which moments later. And I keep these things out immediately. That's how I connect with the world. And people seem to find solace or something, and be able to see these images and share them with other people, because it's not just a photograph, it's an artistic representation. And then later in the evening, when I do my live drawing, which I do on Instagram at 5, and then on Haps TV, which is a new startup streaming network, at 6 o'clock, I do it on paper, and I do it with the camera over my hand as I'm drawing, and it's just straight on the paper. I did another version of that image, and I draw it with pen and ink, and talk as I'm doing it. I'm talking. And today was very emotional. I started doing this during the pandemic to talk about what's going on with our lives, and I do it in Black Lives Matter to talk about what's going on with that, and how we felt about it, and how I was responding to it visually. So it's a way to communicate with people through art and through drawing. And today, that it was just. I made myself draw today. It was difficult.
Thank you. Thank you, Liza. We've got some comments coming in. Neil Parekh asks, the Biden drawing, is that the most text you've used on a drawing?
Oh, no. No, I did a lot of the debates, and I used a lot more text. Yeah.
That's great. Siddharth is watching and says, here, listening and feeling community. Ellen talks about having Confederate flags there, and really problematic, of course. Mark Lee says, I think about the sharp contrast between this madness and the peaceful demonstrations that Reverend Barber led here in DC, led here in North Carolina, and I'll ask Mary Curtis about that. Can you just tell us, Liza, this, what are you trying to capture? You mentioned it a little bit. When this kind of style of drawing, is it impressionistic? How do you describe it?
This is what you're seeing there is sort of impressionistic. Other times I will do somewhat caricatures of the people that I'm drawing, like the politicians. I drew the debates. I drew election night, and it's sort of a visual journalism. It's a way of recording what I'm seeing in response to it. I've been to things in person, like with CBS. I went to the inauguration in 2016. I went to the DNC, and I would draw, but I'd also draw the people behind the scenes, the people that were there. It was a way of recording what was happening, what was going on. And I'm actually hoping to go to the inauguration down east in 2 weeks, but I'm a little concerned about safety. But yeah, so this is the
No, I
kind
can understand that you would be a little nervous about doing that. This is we're seeing on the screen right now your Twitter header, and that's Kamala Harris talking back to Mike Pence, who was interrupting her
during the debate. I drew that during the debate, and that was a very popular drawing. It was a very wonderful thing she was saying. Wonderful. I was worried about her. Apparently, she was in the Capitol building, right?
Sure. Yeah, we were worried about various folks, including minority women who were working there and who were legislators and others. I know you have to go soon, so just a quick question before you go. Tell us about this daily drawing that you do, and how does it work on HAPS TV?
Daily drawing started, like I said, I live draw anyway out in the world with my iPad, but when the pandemic hit, I started live drawing at home at my desk to talk to my audience and draw for them and discuss what was going on. And that began on Instagram, and I still do it on Instagram every day at 5. I do it for about 15 minutes, and people comment. There's a nice little community that's developed on Instagram. And then at 6 o'clock, I do it on HAPS TV, which is a new start. They approached me to see if I would work with them to do it daily, every day at 6 o'clock. I live draw for them. Do pretty much the same thing. Just talk about the news. Sometimes they do an actual political cartoon with an idea, not just an impression drawing, but an actual political cartoon. And I talk about the cartoon. I talk about the issues. I interact with my audience, and it's just another way of connecting with the world and talking about what's important, what matters to us. So,
well, look at some of these nice comments. Therese Steiner says, Liza, thank you for speaking through your powerful live tweet drawing, capturing strong emotions with your pen. We had an earlier comment from Diane Stefani, who said, thank you, Liza, for drawing through such a painful, sad, and frightening day. I encourage everyone who's watching to follow Liza on Twitter at Liza Donnelly, and watch her on Instagram every day at 5 o'clock, and then every day at 6 o'clock on HAPS TV. Liza, thank you as always for your friendship and for your generosity. We have traveled to various parts of the world working together as you live draw things, and but it's amazing what you've also adapted in this new world, and it's great to see you do that.
Thank you so much for having me, Sree, and I'm glad to meet you both, and look forward to connecting with you on Twitter and Instagram. So I think we'll get through this. I think I'm an optimistic person, and I think we'll get through this. I think we'll come out stronger.
Great. Thank you very much, Liza. We'll see you soon.
Bye.
Bye, Liza. And folks, that was Liza Donnelly. Please do connect with her. Let me ask each of you, your kind of reactions to what she was saying, and then we have some questions for you as well. Well, go ahead, Kathy. Oh, 1 second. I think sorry.
Yeah, I had muted myself to make sure about the other disturbance. I really appreciate her drawings. One thing that strikes me about today, along with the constant images of the Confederate flag, are the symbols of Christianity. There was someone carrying this huge cross. That image has stayed with me, and I'll talk more about that. The other image, and I wonder if Liza has seen this and if she would even refer to it in her drawings, is that there was a man in the Capitol who had on a shirt that said Camp Auschwitz, which was really disturbing, right? Really disturbing. And as somebody who writes about race and religion, who just wrote a book on white Christian privilege. Sometimes, Sree, the last time I was on your show, I talked about sometimes I talk Christian privilege and sometimes I'm talking about white Christian privilege, right? Because with Christian normativity, this idea that, well, the Christian way is just the normal way, which is the American way. But in the United States, race is such a preeminent organizing principle, that really then we have to look at white Christian privilege, which is why, as Mary talked about what happened when Reverend Warnock's religion, his version of Christianity, the Black church, when she attacked it, what happened, right? Even though that's Christianity, it's not white Christianity. Black Christianity, the Black church is not fully understood, which is why it gets knocked as anti-American, right? Because it's white Christianity that gets conflated with Americanness. So these are some of the ideas that are going through my head. And this is the book, White Christian Privilege. I'll just put it out there.
Well, thank you. And people should read that book to understand, as you explained to us. I think for you, a lot of what you're seeing today is not a surprise because you knew this is where you're headed. Before I bring Mary back into this, I just want to say one of the things I observed today was a sign that said, Pelosi is Satan. And what I remember growing up and following world news, where you heard the word Satan was the Iranian theocracy saying America is the great Satan. That's what was the way I've always heard and thought of using the word Satan in signs. And that's where we've reached, where these Trump-loving, Trump-following folks are echoing the same kind of words, the anti-American words that were used by anti-Americans as they're burning the American flags and burning each president in effigy in succession since since Carter and Reagan and all of that. That's what I saw today, and I was really struck by that. Mary, your thoughts?
Well, yeah, this is such an interesting discussion for me, and I'll have to read that book. You know, I have my podcast, Equal Time, with Mary C. Curtis, and I've had on the Reverend Barber and also Franklin Graham, the Reverend. So, and it's a very different view of Christianity. The Reverend Barber, who is a man, and I've interviewed him for Time magazine as well. And someone did really refer to his multiracial, multi-generational movement. And he was tweeting after the Warnock victory and looked like it could be the Ossoff victory, that this is the grassroots movement that he saw in 2008 in North Carolina with his Moral Mondays and his marches, where you had young people and people of color and low wealth people, white, Black, Hispanic, the immigrant, and how they all did come together, and how that coalition was a winning coalition in North Carolina in 2008 and then in Georgia. And he was very optimistic. And he is, it's so interesting when I talked with him on the podcast, he's such a hardworking, focused person, but he also has such a sense of joy and resolve. And Franklin Graham, when I had him on, you know, he was such a supporter of Trump. And about the attacks, the physical and literal attacks on the Black churches in the December march, the pro-Trump march in Washington, where they vandalized and tore down the signs and they burned them in the streets, which was such a throwback to burning of churches and Jim Crow. And he pretty much said, well, I decry violence on all sides. And he talked about, I'm a Catholic, and he talked about Biden's Catholicism, and he tore that down. And I had to break in and said, well, you know, there are different strains of Catholicism. He is very devout. He goes to church. He does receive communion. And you do have even that racially kind of split, where you have conservative Catholics who are honoring William Barr, who is putting people to death with executions, even though if you are pro-life, it means that you also are against the death penalty. And then you have Black and brown Catholics who are very different. And there's this alliance with some white evangelicals, which is kind of interesting to me as someone who knows that they didn't always even think of Catholics as Christians. So that you have this racial divide. And today I also wrote a column. I'm going to have a column tomorrow for Roll Call, my column. And it started off one way, and I had to send a sub because I did talk about that faith tradition and Warnock's speech, in which he said, it's dark right now, but morning comes, and scripture tells us weeping may endure for the night, but joy comes in the morning. And my first version of the column was more hopeful about this optimism. And even though you had seen these Black churches attacked in December, and there wasn't, to me, enough outrage about what this represented in the history of this country, but he was bringing this joy in the morning. After the events of this afternoon, I still tried to be optimistic, but my view was a little bit darker. I guess you have to take that long view. So as I said, the guest on the show is something that I think about. And to see, as you say, this cross, this unwieldy cross, brings back that image of it's a holy thing, but we've seen with the Klan how the cross was burned and used. It's such a difficult thing how people interpret and twist even faith to serve an agenda twisted in this way.
Well, I think that, a couple of hours had gone by, and yet Franklin Graham, Tony Perkins, many of the Christian faith leaders who have really supported, and not just supported, but lifted up Trump, enabled Trump, had not tweeted out anything, had not made statements against the violence. And I kind of was keeping an eye on those things. Finally, Franklin Graham did, but it's so soft, and it really is so vanilla, honestly. It says nothing. But we have to remember that this is also the man that would say things like, about Trump, I know he's a little unconventional, and would excuse his very non-Christian values and behavior. And I think that, as a Hindu, as a person of color and someone who is not Christian, but on a personal note is married to a Christian, and before COVID, you could find me in church on many Sunday mornings. I see that cross amidst the Confederate flag and in light of everything that's going on. And in that moment, that symbol is right there with the Confederate flag for me, because it's a symbol of saying people like me, people like Sree, and Mary, we don't belong. We don't belong here. So I think, everybody, a lot of folks are talking about the treatment of the terrorist. And I was so happy, Sree, to see how you called the show from the outset, DC terrorism in DC, or DC terrorism, because I've been talking about the folks who stormed the Capitol as terrorists all day. And I think that's really, really important. And the mainstream media always out there doesn't do that. And so thank you. Thank you for calling it what it is.
Well, thank you. And just a reminder to everyone, we're just grateful to all of you for joining us. And we're going to read some of your comments right now. We have these two fabulous guests in their blue outfits. I should have worn, if I'd gotten the memo, I'd have worn the same color. That would have looked great, and great symbolism for today as well. I also want to just mention that one of my tweets today was that I lived through an actual coup as a high schooler in the Fiji Islands. And there was much less violence than there was today. So that tells you that today was an act of terror. And if anyone, I know that Professor Joshi is actually saying that's good that I use that word, but there will be others who will question it and say, how is this terrorism? We have this idea that terrorism is associated with international conspiracies and certain kinds of violence, but this is terror.
And with Islam.
I have no doubt about it. And I think the media has, we're not talking about Fox, but CNN and others have been using at least the word rioters instead of protesters. I think that was one step. And then others were using the word terrorist or domestic terror. And it's something that I'd love to hear people's thoughts on as we are going here. Let's just look at some of the comments that have come in. Alex Daily TV says domestic terrorism. Jonathan Borstein, who has watched for every single one of these episodes. Thank you, Jonathan. And great guest himself is watching in the East Village. Neil Parekh, who works with us at Digimentors, is watching from Springfield, Virginia. And Abdul says today's a sad day. And that's also a way to think about this. Neil says, I can't believe what I saw on TV today. Doug Levy, also former guest watching from California. Thank you, Doug, for all your great coverage of coronavirus. I mean, that's the other thing, that all of this happened today while we hit records in the number of people dying. America has had the worst response in the world to the crisis. America, which likes to pride itself in so many ways, of how great it is in so many things. And this president who prides himself in so many things, and look at what he has wrought in every single way. I guess, Mary, I would say, as one of our political experts here, that given the chaos with which he started, there should be no surprise at how it's ending. Do you think there's a chance that he won't make it the 14 days, or he steps away, or somebody removes him in some way? What are your thoughts?
Well, it's interesting because and I saw this reporting. I did not do the reporting, but I saw reporting that it was Mike Pence that called out and proved the National Guard, that he did not. He seems so much to be wanting to cling onto this job that he has no interest in doing. We're having the equivalent of a 9/11 as far as the number of deaths a day. And the vaccine rollout has not been going well. And they're putting it onto the states. So this has been a shock, and he is becoming more and more unmoored. I just saw that Twitter is suspending his account, and it may take him off altogether because of the amount of distortions and falsehoods and misinformation and disinformation. Even his video telling people not to be violent, he repeats the lie.
It starts with the lie. He talks about the stolen election.
And so I really, it's astonishing. I don't know what's going to happen, but you see President-elect Biden is the one that has been coming up with the statements that a president does, and talking about the vaccine and getting stimulus checks out and dealing with the American people and what they want, where Trump is just so preoccupied with the power of this job he doesn't want to do, the phone calls that may have illegal behavior in them. And I do want to come back to this issue of disenfranchisement, because I think it's Roger Marshall, I believe, the Kansas senator, saying the people of Kansas are upset. I'm going to object because they feel like they've been disenfranchised. And I think Tim Kaine put it this way, that no, disenfranchisement was when people of color and Black people were not allowed to vote. You voted and your state went for one person, but other people voted for somebody else and you lost.
Yeah.
And, I do believe that is a mental block, that there are people who feel, well, I don't know anybody that voted for Biden, and my friends didn't, and only our votes should count. And what that means so much to people of color who fought and died. John Lewis, who just died, we lost him, in the last year, had his head cracked open, getting people the right to vote. Medgar Evers survived World War II and was killed in his front yard. It's so precious. I've had people in my own family, my 3 elder siblings, who were in the civil rights movement. And this movement, it seems, to take us out of it, to see Trump and his enablers talk about suspicious votes in Philly and Atlanta and Detroit and Milwaukee. And we know what that's about. And them taking over the Capitol and putting on the flags of traitors and distorting a holy symbol. It is blasphemy. It is stunning. It is shocking. And I just, as people of color on this panel, I almost sometimes don't think that some white Americans realize how much in danger we do feel.
Yeah.
See so many of our fellow Americans wanting to erase us in that way with leaders, with our own leaders doing this. And it would be so easy, if you want to appeal to voters, to just say, I want to have an inclusive agenda and I'll appeal to anybody and everybody. But instead, it seems like I'm going to keep certain people from voting with voter suppression tactics.
Yeah.
And when somehow somebody else wins, that's not my person, it's not that, oh, we lost an election. It's, oh my goodness, we were cheated. And we see what that's led to.
Here's news that Deputy Press Secretary Sarah Matthews has resigned from the White House as a result of the events today. Ben Mack says, again, if you had a revelation about Donald Trump today, rethink everything. There was nothing surprising about today. At least he's been consistent from the time he got off the elevator, who he is, what his end game is, what he's expecting to do, how terrible it's all going to be. And that's what we've gotten today. So I don't think anyone should be surprised, but at least some people are resigning. We've seen some people calling out things. There's also been some reporting today that some cabinet members are talking about the 25th Amendment and what that could mean. But there's a lot of skepticism that could have anything would come of it at this moment. I just want to show you, if I can find this tweet. Sorry, here I had the tweet, but it just moved up. But, this is Josh Hawley, the senator who was cheering. This is a moment where he was cheering in the rioters as they were coming onto the terrace, as they were coming on. That was that moment. And it's just been that kind of crazy day today. And look at, people are calling arrest and prosecute. There's just so much going on. And look at this. She served 4 tours in U.S. Air Force only to die after storming the capital of the country for which she fought in order to overturn an election for a demagogue who had respect neither for our military or our democracy. This was the woman who died today, who was shot and killed. I gather she had served in the U.S. Air Force.
Wow.
So that was a whole other dimension of how religion and how white privilege is used in the military. That's a whole other conversation. But she for all the things that she got involved with today, this is on the president that she was shot and killed today. So she was one of those people who attacked the Capitol. She should not have been killed. Everybody, should get that same due process that we would ask for. But there she is. She was shot and killed, and and this is that woman. I'm learning about this live right now. What a story.
What a
the president promised 4 years ago. He promised American carnage. Remember, he said that we had American carnage in that very dark inaugural speech, and it seems like that's how he started, and we're ending up with the carnage.
Yes. We've had the carnage all 4 years. We've had carnage all 4 years. In so many different ways. But yes, today it seems like the pinnacle, perhaps. Well, hopefully it is. I mean, who knows what's still happening? How many days do we have between today and 14 days to go?
Too many days. Yeah.
Too many days.
Yeah. Somebody or some folks are saying, Congress people, that they want to put articles of impeachment again.
Yeah.
It doesn't have that many days left. If you
it takes time, right? Just so Mary, just so that people understand, it's not like you can just make that happen. There's actually a trial that happens in the House, and then there's the articles of impeachment are introduced in the House, and then at the Senate there's that trial phase and all of that. So all of that's not going to happen and in 14 days.
Yeah. Well, I think that also, what we see, Mary, you brought up, disenfranchisement and the way the folks out of Kansas were talking about it and what it actually is. I mean, we saw that in Georgia, disenfranchisement also being, the hours of polling places cut, in high minority areas, in areas with large immigrant populations in Gwinnett County, DeKalb County. And so that's another form of disenfranchisement. But why do folks not understand this? Because we're not doing a very good job teaching this in our schools, and we don't understand the history that's come before. I know that since the murder of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, we are having more conversations about history. I work with schools, with teachers, thinking about, what's being taught. And I know that for a few years now, for several years, many school districts are trying to revamp their curriculum. Certainly since May, there is a revamping of history curricula, but it's going to take a while when for generations, I would argue, we haven't been taught real United States history. I do a lecture sometimes. I'm invited to do a lecture that I call Where We've Been and Where We're Going. But you know what it really is? It's the history on the development of whiteness. But if I call it that from the beginning, people lose their minds, and in it, I show the role of Christianity in the construction of whiteness. Because that's where most of my scholarship and research focus has been. And so so today is, on one hand, Sree, it's not surprising knowing the history of this country. And on another, I think what really got me was that it was such a great day in the morning with Reverend Warnock's win, that for this to fly literally in the face of that was just, it was hard. That was hard to take.
But I do think that's one and the same, because people see that grassroots of activism. As you say, in Georgia, people are praising Raffensperger, the Secretary of State, but the Republican, he was very involved in a lot of these voter suppression tactics of closing and the purges. But people, despite that, or maybe because of that, came out. And I think the success of this Black man, as he said, my mother picked cotton, and then she picked her son for the Senate. Just this grassroots, a Black man, a Jewish man.
Yeah.
And that, to you, and to many people, that shows the promise of America.
Absolutely.
But that for some people, that is their worst nightmare.
It is. Absolutely.
So the anger you saw on the faces of some of these people in the Capitol, the twisted, and they're smashing windows. Like you said, if a Black person did it, oh my goodness. But it was that frustration there.
Yeah.
Their America has changed. But as you say, with the history, they don't really even know the history of America. And it is not taught. And even civics, when people are saying Mike Pence can change it, well, no, he really
Right.
can't. You don't know how America works. The president is not telling you the truth.
That's right.
And it is, but like I do feel like it is once, a step toward progress, and then folks saying, stop it.
Yeah, well, I think that, why there's a segment of white Christian America for whom the win today in Georgia is their nightmare. The increasing population of people of color and religious minorities is their nightmare, right? And that's what, of course, why Trump has always appealed to them, because it was about going back to the America of the 1950s and early 60s. And I specifically say that because that's before the Immigration Act of 1965, which really changed the racial, ethnic, religious demographics of our country, right? But between 24 and 65, our doors were effectively shut. And so many people who were writing about the US then, they had literally erased Black folks, Mexican folks, indigenous folks, from the books, right? So that's what MAGA longs for, and they're not getting their way, and they're making it known.
Oh yeah, a Native American woman ahead of the Department of the Interior. That seems like justice, but
It does.
And also, there's a backlash because when I spoke with Frank and some against LGBTQ, there's quite a backlash against that too. So they see.
Yeah.
And, that is fighting against what they feel. I don't know if they want everybody to go back into the closet or, on the way out, the Trump administration doing things that usually people, when they have a new person coming in, they let it go. But he's trying to cut back on protections for minorities and doing selling off the Arctic rights for drilling. It's executing a whole bunch of people in the federal system. It's as though on their way out, it's a scorched.
Yes.
And scorched earth is exactly what they would love to do, and that's part of the story. I just want to show this comment from John Bartlett, who Professor Kathy will tell us her connection. A former guest on the show, he said the difference between how today's terrorist attack was treated compared to the Capitol bristling with armed guards during last summer's racial justice protests. Remember Trump's Bible moment at St. John's Church? Illustrates white Christian privilege. And here is what they look like. This is the opposite of today. And so upsetting. And we are grateful that John was also a guest. John is Kathy's husband, and he was also a guest on our show explaining. Tell us a little bit about his work. He was explaining the legal aspects of the electoral process to us.
Yeah, John is one of his specialties is election law. He's also an elected official in the state of New Jersey, but he was part of the Biden-Harris legal team and actually was out in Pennsylvania making sure that the vote was protected. And I'm really very proud of all the work that he does. And boy, does he know campaign finance and election law like nobody's business. So anybody who ever has questions, you should actually definitely reach out to John.
I'd also say one of the things I've learned in this entire process is that every side, every aspect of this electoral process needs information and process and understanding of it. And I think a lot of people who were ignoring all of this educated themselves, participated, because we've seen how fragile all of this is, right? Like it came down to a few Republicans having the guts to stand up to Trump. You can imagine if Georgia's Secretary of State, who's now a hero, had gone the other way. I mean, remember, we were all cursing the governor of Georgia just a couple of years ago when he made sure, as Secretary of State, that Black folks would be disenfranchised and couldn't vote properly in his own election, and that's how he became governor. And now he's a hero to some because Trump is fighting him. That's how close we've come. That if a few states had gone in another direction or the votes had been closer, Trump would have found a way to stay in office. And I don't think everybody understands that.
No.
And it's important for us to never forget this moment. I mean, this is so scary. Mary, how will you look at this day as we go forward?
Well, I do think, but look, in Pennsylvania, if you look now, the Republican legislature has refused to seat someone who was elected. So we can see what happens. If you look that up, he won by very narrow margins, and they were going to seat him while the other person was doing it, and they refused, even though they had made the deal to do it. So we can see when people, as you say, with bad intentions, they can wield the power. And now they do after this last election. Many of the state legislatures will be gerrymandering and redistricting and that power. So I do think what you said, Sree, is on my mind. It is very fragile. People should not breathe this sigh of relief. And look at how all the foreign countries are looking at us. Our allies are feeling sorry. Folks who are more repressive that we have criticized are also saying, well, who are you to criticize? And I don't think they will trust us because they are relieved that Joe Biden was elected. But now they're saying the American people who, as you said, are mishandling COVID, are capable of putting someone in. And even this election, he may not have won, but there are over 70 million people who took a look at the inequalities, the incompetence on COVID, economic upheaval, racial unrest, someone who's putting salt in the wounds of division. And they said, you know what? I want 4 more years of that.
Exactly. That's the shocking part. Let's look at some of the other comments coming in. Linda's watching from Long Island. Stefan, our friend, says, good evening. On such a dark day in our country's history, they need to evoke the 25th Amendment. So 25th to get the 45th out. Yeah. But there are also people, by the way, here is an Indian complaining, terrorism, how, dude? You can hear in his tone, right? You could hear it. And you know how we can say it's terrorism? This is what the Oxford Dictionary says. A person who uses unlawful violence and intimidation, especially against civilians, in the pursuit of political aims. That's terrorism, and that's what we saw today. And we've seen other versions of it as well. Mr. B says, thank you for having the broadcast tonight. Cherry is watching from Kerala in India. Debbie is watching from Fort Lauderdale, shocked about today's activities. The president and enablers must be held accountable. Just really amazing what's going on. Shalini's watching from Brook, Virginia. Somebody just called me dumb right now. I mean, the trolls are out as well, right?
Yeah.
That's what also happens. Deborah says, Lincoln said, one country, one destiny. And unfortunately, we are looking at this. And here's, again, a troll. What do you call terrorism as a result of voter fraud? Blame those who start the voter fraud. Were there examples of actual fraud, but it turned out to be Republicans who voted twice or Republicans? We're not saying that this process is perfect, right?
Right.
always be some shenanigans somewhere. But to say, as President Trump said before the elections, that I will, the only way I can lose is if this is rigged. He said that the last time. He said that even when he lost an Emmy award when he was host of The Apprentice. He complained that it was a rigged election. He complained about Iowa. You remember that, Mary and Kathy? Yeah. And he blamed Ted Cruz. And Ted Cruz went out and said all these terrible things in response to him. Yeah. And now that's the Ted Cruz who is sucking up to him now. Absolutely. After Trump accused his father of assassinating JFK, after he insulted his wife.
Yes, yes.
And I've interviewed Heidi Cruz. She's a lovely person. That was like, wow, I wonder how their marriage gets through.
Yeah. Well, then what about George Conway, who's now calling for the 25th, and his wife is the very unusual Kellyanne Conway. And then Tiku is saying, remember the outrage when Kaepernick protested by taking a knee, and he was labeled a traitor, a son of a bitch, and so much worse.
Well, for
Dr. Patel.
No kind of protest will be acceptable.
That's right.
And because he was very respectful. And I just wanted to your listener, our listener who talked about voter fraud, there were close to 60 cases brought in courts before Democratic, but mainly Republican judges, including many that Trump appointed, and they were thrown out because you have to have evidence, and they did not have the evidence. You just can't say it. And I'm here in North Carolina where they had that case where they had to rerun a whole election in one of the congressional districts in the last cycle, and it was a Republican operative. So, and in Georgia, they've hand counted those votes.
Yeah,
counted them. So Biden next state about 3 or 4 times.
We only have a few minutes left. I just want to go through some of these great comments here. Sonali says, so great to see women guest speakers. We always try to highlight not just women speakers, but all kinds of folks. But we certainly are proud of, and we've counted, as you've seen, we've had a majority of female speakers. We're very proud of that. But that's also because we have a great, we have access to these wonderful folks who come on the air and talk to us, and we're always grateful for that. So many comments coming in. I'm also grateful. My mom is watching in Kerala, India. Hi, Amma, love you. So glad that you're watching. Here's Fergus saying, what about Warnock and Ossoff? Let's go Georgia. For those of you who missed it, we talked about that at the very beginning, including the fact that Kati is from Georgia originally. She's now a Jersey girl, but she's from Georgia.
Originally a Georgia peach.
Yeah, and Mary lives in the South, in North Carolina, and really knows what's happening there. Do you think North Carolina, the trends are that could also go blue?
Well, it's been back and forth. Obama won in 2008, and then it's trended a little more red, but we do have a Democratic governor, Roy Cooper, who did pretty well with COVID. Now we're having this post-holiday spikes. And the Senate race, Tom Tillis won re-election, but we had the Democratic candidate who had that little sexting scandal, so he didn't really help himself.
Would you think we could have won, or Democrats could have won, if there was a non-sexting?
I think it's a chance statewide because it's a very diverse, well-educated, but like many states, the cities are very blue. We have a Black female mayor in Charlotte, and the more rural areas are not. So it's like those kinds of
I think North Carolina, I think the only thing it needs is a fair fight. Stacey Abrams and the Asian Americans Advancing Justice and all the organizations that did what they did in Georgia. If we can get chapters in North Carolina, I think y'all are good then.
They need some more grassroots organizing, but it's getting there. It's getting there. But before we sign off, I did want to do a little plug. I noticed Kathy had up her book. I have an essay in a book that's out now. What the voters have spoken: essays on life after Trump, with some facts.
Doing
a virtual book event with one of the other contributors, who is Anthony Scaramucci. So I think it'll be fun. We have General Wesley Clark. We have a New Yorker cover artist that did the cover. We have Chris Buckley and Howard Bryan, a fascinating group. So I talk a little bit about my mom, who was an elections worker, the trash poll workers. I had to say, listen, I grew up in a house where voting was sacred, and she took it very seriously. And she happened to be a Republican, a Lincoln Republican. I'm not sure what she would make of, well, I kind of am sure what she would make of the party if she were alive, because she had started to sour a bit with the Southern strategy. But yeah, so
tell us the title of the book and when it comes out.
It's out now. Now What? The Voters Have Spoken: Essays on Life After Trump. But yeah, it's as I say in it, when people say I'm not interested in politics, I say, listen, you may not be interested in politics, but politics is interested in you.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, I love that. Please follow Mary Curtis on Twitter. She's terrific. M Curtis NC3. There, she's got the North Carolina in there as well, and she also is a columnist for Roll Call and has a great podcast. So everyone, please do connect with her, and of course connect with Professor Joshi. She's Prof K Joshi on Twitter. Just a couple of more quick comments here, and then we'll wrap up for tonight. I think we're all exhausted. Mark says Durham is a super progressive city. We're trying to get the rest of the states to join us and Charlotte. And Mark says an African-American brother is running for the mayor of Raleigh. And my dad, who's watching, Kerala Hayach, I love you as well. He wrote about living with Trump as we have to live with the coronavirus. I think that's certainly one of the things that we've had to deal with. So just great to have everyone here. Great insights and analysis, as Jonathan, who's watched all these episodes. And I think that's really important. Laura says racism and complicity is on full display today. Very, very sad day. And Therese Steiner, great friend who's also been on the show, says watching from Redondo Beach, California. Thanks you for standing up for democracy. So on that note, I'm going to ask both of you to give us some final thoughts and how to look at not just the next 2 weeks, but look ahead and what we can do. So I'll give you a chance to just think about that for a moment. And I want to do a plug for our other show, which is called the New York Times Read Along, which will take place on Sundays at 8:30 a.m. Eastern. And Mary has been a guest on that show, where we read the New York Times out loud like crazy people. We've been doing it for 5 years now. And our guest is journalist, author, and justice advocate, and former New York Times staff writer and author of The Women Who Made New York. Julie Scelfo will be with us at Julie Scelfo. Please follow her, and please join us 8:30 a.m. Eastern time this coming Sunday. And with that, I'm going to go to Kathy first, and then to Mary to just get their final thoughts for today. Thank you both so much for being here and sharing your insights.
Well, thanks, Sree, for allowing me to be here and reflect and be with all of you. I'm not really sure what the next 2 weeks holds. And then after that, there may have been a couple of thousand people there today, but they represent many millions of people who feel the way they feel, who are living amongst us in our communities. And I'm wondering what work on the ground is going to look like. When we have parents who are objecting to the fact when teachers and school districts and schools want to teach what we consider real United States history, and they're thinking, oh, now we're pushing a certain curricula because, Trump says certain things and then everybody just believes it. So it's going to be a long, hard road ahead. And I am concerned about what the next 14 days holds. I am an optimist, and I do believe in the promise of this country. It is why my parents immigrated here in 1971, and I do believe that focusing and pointing out white privilege and white Christian privilege is actually what we have to do to get to equity and justice. So it's hard work, and I'm happy to be doing it, but it's going to be a long road ahead. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Khyati. And I'm showing everyone your Twitter page. You can see here, she's at Prof. K. Joshi, scholar, educator, public speaker, race, religion, immigration, practitioner of social justice education. My favorite part here is pizza is thin crust with extra jalapenos. So I have to ask Mary about her pizza choice as well. Khyati, thank you so much, and congrats on your book. And I know that's going to continue to be an important landmark book for people who want to understand. As you say here, any discussion of religion in the US that does not explore its intersections of race and racism is incomplete, as is any discussion of politics that doesn't include those comments as well. So let's go now to Mary with the final word.
Okay, I try to stay away from gluten, so I haven't been doing too much pizza lately. But I do want to say, first, Julie is a colleague of mine at the Op-Ed Project, senior leader, so that should be a fascinating discussion. I'll be sure to tune in. And I feel, as my partner guest in blue tonight feels, I try to be an optimist. And when you see scenes like this, it's scary, but I also am aware of all the people who fought throughout history. I look at this new Congress coming in with Cori Bush, folks like that, an activist who is now the first Black woman to represent Missouri. And she's tough and strong. And you have look at this, 2 senators from Georgia who are going to give the Democrats the majority in the Senate. And it's still going to be tight, but I look at the agenda that might be able to get through, maybe some stimulus, some work on climate, voting rights, redoing that John Lewis Voting Rights Act that has been sitting on Mitch McConnell's desk. Moved it. This is, if we can get through these next 2 weeks, they can get to work and do some things for the American people. And the ones who aren't with the program, well, they're going to help them too. So this is America, and there's a lot of work to be done and progress to be made. So I'm trying to look toward that and the possibilities.
I love that, Mary. Thank you so much. I think you're both optimistic, more optimistic than me, but I appreciate that. Mary's Twitter bio says, roll call columnist, podcast at NPR at WCCB Charlotte, contributor, the Op-Ed Project. And she went to Harvard's Nieman Foundation, Nieman program, and she's a follower of politics, theater, and political theater. So I think both of you have that ending of your Twitter bio just right. Fantastic. Thank you both. All of you who are watching, we are going to replay this immediately on all our channels, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and LinkedIn. Please continue to share. Tag a friend who would learn from this conversation today. And I learned so much, and I'm so grateful to both of you spending your time with us tonight. What an incredible opportunity for all of us. Thank you very much, everybody. We'll say goodbye.